Hello and a very warm welcome to the 27th episode of Control Alt Defense. Vishnu and I would like to start by offering you our profoundest apologies for not being with you for the last couple of weeks. We promise that this was only because we were otherwise engaged in what has been a couple of the busiest couple of weeks as far as news is concerned. But Vishnu, this is an episode we should have done. And it's an episode that people were looking to us to do when the Tejas crash took place, and that's the topic of the day. So let me just start by saying it straight that we offer our deepest condolences to the family of the Indian Air Force pilot who was flying that Tejas fighter that crashed at the Dubai Airshow, Wing Commander Namansh Syal, his family, his squadron, the Indian Air Force at large, the veteran community, and many of his friends and admirers. He's really become a hero. And what was truly startling and what made this story hit home to so many people is that it happened in front of thousands of cameras, Vishnu, at the Dubai Airshow. You and I have been to that air show, so we know how in your face this accident actually was. So I want to start by asking you, Vishnu, what you think happened. And Vishnu and I, by the way, spent about 8 hours of that particular day reporting live on the crash, and that's the
why
reason
we never did.
That's the reason we didn't have an episode of Control All Defense. So again, to get that apology out of the way, Vishnu, what happened?
Just very briefly, I think what Shiv says is important, and just to our viewers, and I know all of you want an episode every week, and unfortunately there are times, and we've been facetious about this in the past, but the real reason is we just get sort of drawn into something which is so intense, whether it's meetings or work or breaking news, and that's exactly what happened this last Friday. We were all set over here, our producer Pavitra sitting over here, telling us or goading us, please come, record this.
Yeah.
And then this happened, and we just simultaneously, I ran to the studio, you went to the other studio upstairs, and we spoke about it. And it felt terrible talking about it.
Yeah.
It did. What went wrong? Well, the diplomatic answer...
Start with what we saw.
Well, I think that's a safer way of doing it, and it makes a lot more sense. And I think the reason that's the smarter way of doing it is because there is an inquiry. It's being done by technical people. They'll have a lot more data ultimately compared to what we have at this stage. They would have analyzed all of the photographs. They would have been monitoring the radio transmissions. They may have been present in different angles to actually see things first up. And they would know the routine inside out. So let me describe what we saw. The flight routine had taken place. And there was a particular place, and we're going to have the video up, where the aircraft slightly bunts up like this, and then moves to this position, and then moves into an outer turn. Outer turn, also known as a negative G turn. So just pause your thoughts on this for a moment and let me explain it. Because normally when an aircraft banks, suppose it banks to the left, this is the cockpit of the aircraft, then the aircraft pulls away like that. That's a standard positive G bank. Similarly, on this side, the cockpit is facing me, the tail is facing me, it banks away like this. A negative G turn does the opposite. It actually moves like this. And the reason it's rare and difficult for aircraft to do is for a couple of reasons. Number one, the fuel systems on the aircraft are designed for a particular type of maneuver typically. To be able to do this in a negative G scenario, right? We live in a 1G environment. Our bodies are acclimatized to a 1G environment. To do that in a negative G, where there is no gravity per se, requires a very high level of engineering. The fly-by-wire control system has to be robust enough to be able to handle it. Over a period of time, they have seen that the Tejas can do it, so they do it at the flight display. So coming back to what I was saying, here you have the Tejas flying like this. Usually, when the aircraft rolls out of this maneuver, the pilot does this, right? And then comes wings level. So from this, the recovery is you go wings level like this, and your wings level now, and then you sharply pull away. So you move from a negative G flight regime to a positive G flight regime where you pull away. In this particular case, from this angle, the aircraft did go into a loop, into a roll, but inexplicably, the nose went down like that. And so instead of a snap roll and pulling away, which is what it always does, it went to a nose down, sort of a barrel roll, which is a roll like this, where you bunt up and then you sort of go down, lose altitude, and then come back up. But there was no altitude to be had, right? So in the final phase of the flight, there is the aircraft going down like this, nose down, no altitude to spare. The roll happens, the pilot recovers, wings are level, but then there is the vertical speed of the aircraft, which is still very strong. So even though the wings are level and the commands in the cockpit may be to pull up, it takes time for that to reflect to horizontal flight.
Simply not enough altitude.
So it kept going down and it mushed and it crashed.
Before I proceed to my next question, Vishnu, I want to ask you, what would have been the minimum altitude separation from the ground for a successful positive G pull away from the ground? Because the reason I asked that is because you said something very important. You said this has been done several times before.
Oh yes,
including by Wing Commander Syal
and we've seen
others, and we've seen it.
Yeah,
this is a routine display element in the Tejas display in exercises across the world, displays across the world. So what is that altitude that he required, safe altitude he required to be able to pull away?
That's a factor of the airspeed that he was traveling in. And I would suggest, in speaking to a few other people, a few hundred more feet, and he would have been able to transition away. But he didn't do that. And therefore, there are other questions that also investigators would be able to be looking at. And the basic question is this. This is something committed to memory. The maneuvers in a flight display are committed to memory. When a pilot isn't flying these, he's simulating it inside the Tejas simulator. When he's not doing that, he's simulating it, you know where? In his mind. Yeah. You're constantly thinking about it. And you're constantly thinking about the position of your hand, the position of your feet, right? On the rudders, and of course on your throttle. And you're visualizing the entire thing. Very often you'll see videos of pilots, aerobatic pilots, doing all sorts of strange steps outside an aircraft, where they do this and they do that, they look up and they look to the sides, and everybody's like, what is he doing? Is this some sort of a dance? No, it's not. They are focused visually on what it is that they're trying to do. This pilot would have done that any number of times. He would have known every single maneuver. He would have known exactly when to come out of a particular maneuver out of muscle memory. That's the extent to which they practice it. Why did this happen? Why did the aircraft... why did the aircraft sort of, as it came out of that roll, bunt down, right? Or prior to coming out of the roll, bunt down? No one knows. And so, people are wondering whether he was in a G-lock sort of situation. He was in a partial blackout or red out situation. So I think this does need a little bit of explanation. When you're in a negative G scenario, the forces on your body are actually opposite to a positive G scenario. We are now in a plus 1G environment. Our bones are structured and our muscles are structured to enable us to walk upright in this and resist the force of gravity. A simple way of looking at plus let's say 4G, is there is 4 times the weight of yourself on your body, across your body, spread evenly out, when you do these very harsh 4G maneuvers or 5G maneuvers. I've gone up to 9G plus.
Yeah.
And I have experienced, and when I say 9G plus, I can tell you it's more than 9G that I've gone through. Not more than maybe 2 seconds. It shuts down from here in a positive G, in a plus G, exactly as the books say it, exactly as you would have seen in movies. We have peripheral vision right now, both you and me. It starts coming in like that.
Yeah, it goes down.
You hold it. You try and tighten this thing. And then obviously the pilot lets go and it disappears like that. You're back to the G load.
And your vision swims back.
And it just immediately recovers. Pilots wear a G suit. There's a kamarband. There is a forced feed of air, depending on the aircraft. The Rafale and the Gripen have a forced feed of air, where the system is stuffing oxygen down your throat to ensure that you're breathing properly and that your lungs are not decompressing. That they are,
forcing the air into your lungs.
Yeah, and they're maintaining a particular shape.
Yeah.
In a positive G maneuver, the blood flow moves from your head to your feet. And so the bladder on your G suit is activated and it inflates and really squeezes, Shiv, as you would have felt, your legs, to prevent blood landing up in your feet and pooling by your feet. Then you would get into there's not enough blood in your brain, and you get into a blackout. That's a positive G. When you are doing this, you enter into a negative G regime.
It's the other way,
where the blood moves from your feet to your head. And other tiny capillaries in your brain, and the brain is so much more sensitive and vulnerable than other parts of your body in that sense. If there is a capillary that bursts, a tiny vein that bursts, it's game over. So therefore, you don't see a negative 9G maneuver. You barely cross negative 1.2, 1.3, and you end it. Even this maneuver was just a few. When the pilot came out of this maneuver to transition to a positive G regime, it's moving from one end of the spectrum to the other. And was there a particular scenario where the pilot may have gotten into what is called a G-lock? A G-lock is when...
a G-induced loss of consciousness.
Correct. But there is a partial G-lock and there is a G-lock. And whether the pilot actually was in either of these states is a mystery. We do not know. Not even on the basis of the close-up pictures which we have seen, which appears to show that the pilot's left hand may not have been on the throttle. I don't think, in having looked at that very closely, that is conclusive. I'll tell you why. The roll was sloppy, for whatever the reason was, but the fact of the matter is that he did complete the roll. And a second, or less than a second before the crash, he was actually nose up. So the pilot was aware, could it be that for just a fraction of a second, he had a blackout or a red out or whatever it was, and there was a problem in comprehension when blood flow is impacted.
For a split second.
And then you come out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting it on the table.
Wow.
And just for the benefit of all of those saying these guys are not experts, how dare they talk about it? We're educated people. I've done 15 sorties on fighter aircraft approximately. I've been warned and trained on ejection seats as a Shiv, about the dangers of positive and negative G, about what you're going to encounter and how you fight it. And so one speaks from as much experience, I suppose, as a civilian
and Vishnu,
not a pilot can.
Yeah, and Vishnu and I have both, don't claim to know exactly what fighter pilots are going through, but the both of us have flown fighters where we've, experienced 9+ G. So we have a sense of what the body endures during that time. So it's unimaginable what it must be like for a fighter pilot to be in a situation where he either has a blackout or a red out, because these are guys unlike us. We lose consciousness in a moment, but these are guys who are trained for sustained.
They go through centrifuges.
They're training, yeah.
No, so Shiv, that appears to be something. Yeah. Now, I think it's important that as responsible journalists, we also mention that investigators will be looking at the performance of the engine. They'll be looking at the digital fly-by-wire control system. They'll be looking at whether there was any ingestion of anything into the engine at that particular stage. I think their job will be made a lot easier on the basis of the videos which actually exist and the photos. Unfortunately, in the Indian system, we are not very transparent about the release of military, crash reports.
Yeah.
We just aren't. And I think that's a shame because it's transparency which is important. So will we actually know more about this? Chances are we won't. But that's a larger question of transparency. But there is a process which is starting, and I would suggest that our people would probably have a fair idea of what went wrong already.
Could there be a mechanical or aircraft-related explanation to what happened in those final moments?
Shiv, I can think of 15 different variable conditions. But then, I'd be just imagining up stuff. What I would like to say, as we transition perhaps to the next or segue to the next part of this conversation, is that anybody who gets on record and says that that rubbish Tejas aircraft, it went and killed our pilot, is talking, are we allowed to say?
Yeah, you're allowed to say it.
Yeah, crap. That's just not true. This is an aircraft which has been flying since 2001, first flight. It's had only 2 crashes, 1 fatal. This one, the previous one, there was an engine problem. The pilot ejected. The aircraft, it
basically
kept
just
flying for a period of
cruised
time.
into the ground.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So it works. The aircraft works. It's got the best safety record of any fighter in the Indian Air Force. So let's not write off the Tejas. I disagree with some of the statements made by a couple of people, including people of a very high reputation, saying that, this is going to impact Hindustan Aeronautics and their reputation. Anybody looking to buy a fighter aircraft potentially would need to understand a great deal more than just say, oh, it's crashed over there and, so therefore we will never touch the HAL Tejas. The F-16 has a very high number of crashes as well. Many other aircraft have a high number of crashes. It's not the Tejas. It's not its flight control system. It's not its avionics. It's none of that, right? And if it is that, then that's something investigators will need to figure out.
No,
you cannot write off an aircraft based on one crash.
No, absolutely. And I'm gonna come to the part about the safety of the Tejas in a moment because I want to talk a little bit more about it. But when this crash happened, Vishnu, one of the things it was very easy to see is that it's easy to speculate about the reasons for a crash. It's easy to, and I saw a lot of credible news agencies, journalists talk about, oh, it's definitely the engine. Oh, it's definitely the training. Someone was saying something about disorientation. Someone was saying something about, the flight control system of the Tejas, and there were all kinds of things. There were, of course, I'm not even going to mention the conspiracy theories because they don't warrant any attention. But the fact of the matter is that this was unusual because the Tejas, like you said, is known to be a fighter that has an incredibly admirable safety record. Started flying in 2001, entered service in 2016. This was the first fatal accident of the Tejas. In view of all of that, what kind of impact, and this is I want to address this as quickly as possible. What kind of impact does this have on the Tejas program at 2 levels? One, as far as the Indian Air Force is concerned, what is the Indian Air Force thinking about this crash? Are they looking at it simply as another investigation, which they have to because there are so many layers to it? And then there's also the aspect of exporting the Tejas. Let's not forget that the reason for flying in foreign air shows is with the very real expectation that there could be potential, customers for the Tejas.
Has the Indian Air Force grounded the aircraft? Nope.
Yeah, they have not.
What does that say?
Yeah.
It's not about the aircraft, at least not yet. Is this going? And there's been a Hindustan Aeronautics statement yesterday as well, rejecting any theories or statements from people saying that there's something wrong with the plane. It's not that kind of situation, so let's not make it that.
Yeah.
And if it is the plane, and we'll be the first people over here talking about that, but let that emerge. In this case, there's a great deal of footage which we've described without necessarily saying that, oh, look, this is what happened. But all we've done is describe it while repeatedly making the point that there could be many other factors. Let investigators go and sort of figure that out. But prima facie, if we are not in a situation where we should be blaming the aircraft or its manufacturers or its export prospects. But as far as export prospects are concerned, I would suggest that there's a way to go before the Tejas actually achieves, export success. The timelines are slipping when it comes to delivery of the Tejas Mark 1A. That's the aircraft that we really want. Engine delivery has been a problem. Integration of weapons is an issue. I think those are the concerns with the Tejas, challenges with the Tejas Mark 1A program. Whether or not it results in exports, nobody would want to buy the Tejas Mark 1. People would want the Mark 1A or Mark 2.
Yeah.
Because that gets to a more contemporary standard. So I think that the entire talk of it impacting the Tejas's export potential is highly premature at this stage. I do think, and Shiv, you do this in a sense better than me. In terms of the family, the squadron, you reflect on this in your tweets, and you've done this not just now, but you've done this over a long period of time. I noticed always whenever there's a crash or an incident or the loss of lives, you immediately offer not an opinion, but you offer a sense of what you're feeling at the time. And I think you felt pretty hurt, didn't you, when this happened? Because, a plane is one thing, but a fighter pilot is the real weapon.
Yeah.
It's not the plane.
Yeah.
And to train a fighter pilot, a squadron is a family. That young officer, 34-year-old man, his wife in uniform, holding on to the girl, the child, and then she salutes. And then she salutes him. And when she sees his casket, that's just something that was such a moving. And we've seen it over and over again.
Yeah.
Young pilots dying for whatever the reasons are. It's just so sad. We spoke to Air Chief Marshal Dhanwa about this also.
No, you're right, Vishnu. I mean, I think the immediate impact of a crash of this kind is very, very painful, and I think we were so busy reporting it when the story broke on NDTV that day that we didn't really have the time to process all of it. And then, of course, we got to know who the pilot was a little later. I realized I knew who the pilot was. I'd met him a couple of times in the past.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Wing Commander Namansh was someone. He wasn't a friend, but I had met him,
right,
in official gatherings a couple of times, and I knew that he was a Tejas pilot. You and I have both flown the Tejas, so I had met him on one occasion related to that as well. An incredible young man, very simple, full of humor, a very typical fighter pilot, liked his aviators, the kind of person you'd expect to be a fighter pilot, very into flying, test pilot, loved pushing the machines to their extremes, his wife and daughter, it's so painful. And, what does one do but sort of repeat the same old thing when something like this happens, which is that the courage and the fortitude of military families is something to acknowledge every time something like this happens, because they're constantly living with that terrible nagging fear at the back of their minds about when they're going to get that call, or if they're going to get that call, or every time the phone rings, it sends a shiver down their spine. Or in the writing of my books, I've met wives of fighter pilots in Jodhpur. There was a couple. When she heard her husband's MiG-21 take off, she would go and sit in the puja room, and she wouldn't come back until he would phone her. That was the deal once he landed. So, this is what Air Force families and culture is like. And, you and I have met so many of them, Vishnu.
You're right, absolutely. But here's another thing, and this is true of all our services. When there's a loss of life, the unit, the regiment, the corps, the command, the force, they all come together. And certainly in the case of the Air Force, the squadron comes together. And it's not just to be with the family at a time when they're suffering. That doesn't ever go away. I know about, generals who passed away when they were, of illness after they retired, after having reached the rank of lieutenant colonel. People who commanded, 4 corps and the like, Gurkha officers, who till this day, nearly 30 years after or so after they passed away, the regiment, somebody just comes and say, "Hi, ma'am, how are you?" To that officer's widow. Is there anything I can do?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can help you process? Is there anything else? Ma'am, why don't you come to the regiment? Ma'am, why don't you see this? Why don't you do that? That never goes away. This is a spirit. This is taking camaraderie to a level which very few forces around the world have.
Yeah.
And this is going to remain. That little girl who lost her dad will always be an Air Force girl. She will always derive strength from that family. And I think that's so important. That Air Force officer, who's his wife, knew more than anybody else perhaps the risks her husband was in. Being an aerobatic pilot, pushing the envelope every single time, she knew exactly what he was doing. And yet, this was a family that where he followed orders, and she's part of that. And of course, it's about adventure, it's about challenge, it's about testing yourself, it's about your career. And so she was part of that decision. And it's one that she may rue now, but I think it's one that she feels deeply proud about.
Yeah.
Deeply, deeply, deeply proud about her husband, what he did, what he stood for. So, we keep talking about technology, but somehow this conversation has moved to family.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
It's hugely important, and I'm glad you did, Vishnu, because this story is incomplete without the human story of Wing Commander Syal and his family, and we will always remember them, and we will pay tribute.
One of the things, Shiv, which I've always done, because as many of our viewers know, nothing has impacted me more than I would suggest Kargil.
Yeah.
Because I was young, I was impressionable, but I've never stopped being in touch with the families of many of our war heroes. And, these mothers, they keep treating me like their children. Every time I go to their house, they admonish me for putting on weight. Then they say that I've bought you a shirt and now you have to wear this shirt. And if it doesn't fit you, then you have to lose weight. Or I will buy you another shirt. It's embarrassing because these are expensive gifts which they lay out all the time. And so I suppose it's that military family is my sort of thing that we are all very attached to.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and I think, and the links that you have with these families, goes back to combat. Mine is with, meeting them when I've been writing about the loved ones in my books.
Yeah.
You're doing the same right now. It's a different world. It's one we don't live in, but we have the privilege of experiencing that kind of courage every now and then. But coming to the last part of this conversation, Vishnu, in this episode is, the Tejas has been in service for just under a decade now. It entered service in 2016.
Yeah.
There are 2 squadrons. In many ways, in terms of numbers, the Tejas story hasn't even started fully yet.
No, it's not.
In the Indian Air Force. So that's one sort of poignant irony to this crash, that this takes place at a time when the Tejas chapter is really beginning in the Indian Air Force.
Yeah, it is.
The Mark 1A is about to enter service. There are 180, if I'm not mistaken, on order, nearly 200 aircraft on order. That's the improved version of the Tejas. There's the Tejas Mark II that's going to be ahead with a more powerful engine. So in the context of this runway that we have for the Tejas ahead of us, does this accident do anything? Does it, does it give the system pause in any way? Or given the aircraft's incredible safety record, it's just another, tragic wrinkle in what is otherwise going to be an incredible future journey of this aircraft?
Well, I hope this aircraft has an incredible future journey. When I was in university in Canada in 1993, 1994, the first Usenet groups were out. And we used to do flame wars against Pakistanis, not unlike what you do now, Shiv, all these decades later, but on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I have tracked the Tejas, and which was just an idea at that stage, essentially, from that time to now. And the number of dogfights I've entered with fellow Pakistani Usenet users. And, that was quite something. So this aircraft and what it stands for means a great deal to me. So what the future of the aircraft holds, we've taken too much time over it.
Yeah.
Everybody will admit that.
And we've done a couple of episodes on it separately.
I will tell you, and as we move away from this, I think that the Tejas Mark II is where it's at. I will tell you that the Tejas Mark II is not Tejas. It's actually another aircraft.
Yeah.
That's right, viewers. It's of a higher weight.
In fact,
category.
it's the LCA Mark II. It's not even called the Tejas.
I think it, and that's the point, Shiv. It's not LCA anymore. It's not a light combat aircraft. It's an aircraft in the weight category of the Mirage 2000.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they don't highlight or advertise that. The HAL chairman
called
told
it the
me
medium weight fighter for a while. Yeah.
The HAL chairman told me that in that interview.
Yeah.
So I think the future of Tejas, if you can still call it Tejas, firstly, I think they need to change that name for the Tejas Mark II. Call it something else because it is different.
Yeah.
Bigger engine, bigger size. It's a new aircraft that has a real future. And as far as the Mark 1A, better get on fast and in numbers.
Yeah. How long do you think, just as a final word on the Dubai Airshow crash, how long do you think it's going to take for the crash investigation to reach some kind of a, conclusive report? And the reason I ask that is because, we are in a year where we're wondering about crash reports and accident reports of other accidents as well. Of course, I'm not comparing. The two cannot be compared. But I can't help wondering, given that these reports rarely ever make it out into the public domain, but the fact that it happened in full public view gives it a kind of there's an element of public expectation
Correct.
about answers as well.
Well, I do believe that there's a digital flight data recorder. I don't know if that's been recovered or what condition it was at. If there is that in this particular aircraft, then that would help actually understand the where the control surfaces were, what the pilot was doing, what the pilot was attempting in that particular phase of that flight, and give you a very clear idea of just what took place. But I think military courts of inquiry move at a fairly brisk pace, so I would expect them to know in a finite period of time. Will they come out with all of the findings or not? That's a larger question. We'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see, and we will ask the questions. We will, Vishnu and I will, of course, continue to report on this, not just through this podcast, but please watch us on our channel and all of the platforms here on NDTV, because this is a story in motion, as I call it, and we will keep updating you on what happens as far as the investigation is concerned. Vishnu, thanks very much for that. We've answered as many of the questions that we possibly could, but remember, this is a relationship that we have with you, the listener and the viewer. So if you think we've missed out on something, drop it in our comments, send us a message on our social media, whatever you like, and we will be sure to maybe do another episode, revisit some of this, as the picture becomes clearer as to what happened to that Tejas, what happened with Wing Commander Namansh Syal. We will, I promise you, get into it again and offer more information and more answers. Thanks so much for watching.
Goodbye.